Am I audible to everyone? You guys hear me?
Hello, good evening. Yes, we can hear you.
Great, amazing. So let's begin today's session. Back and neck straight. You can gently close the eyes. Start observing the breath. Just sit in any comfortable posture. Once you have attained your posture, then you can just gently close the eyes and connect with your breath. Just being aware of each inhalation and each exhalation. And once you feel stable enough, your mind is more focused than before, just begin to deepen your breath. Leading you to relax the mind even further. Body is stable and comfortable. Mind is calm and prepared for chanting Om. Exhale completely and inhale for Om. Sari, 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 Sham. Just feel the vibrations. Join both your palms together in front of the chest and the together. Close the eyes. And very slowly and looking at the palms, open up the eyes, and back to your smile. So we had our off, and now we're back with another week of classes, right? So I hope you enjoyed your day off. Uh, you are able to practice everything that you are being taught or at some point of your day during your off. Yeah. So last time we discussed, the origin of yoga, and I ended with a story where I was telling you about the origination of yoga and how Lord Shiva is considered to be the you know, main person who uh, invented in the sense that he is considered to be the person who gave yoga to the world, right? And today we are going to discuss a topic in very close, which is very closely connected to the origin of yoga, which is your history and development of yoga. So today we are going to touch up upon this topic because we are going to study this subject. So it's very good to always understand the roots of something you are about to begin. Right, that is what we call our own research. Whenever you are about to begin something new, you research about it, you study about it a little bit, and that way it helps you to stay connected to the main purpose, to how it how it changed according to time as well. So it's not necessarily if something is given as x, it remains x throughout, right? So it depends on how we are perceiving that x thing. So yoga, something very similar happened with yoga as well. With time it developed, and it like people took it as per their understanding, as per their level, right? So as I tell you about the development, you will be able to understand this aspect much more easily than you are able to right now. But before I start this topic, one very uh, you know uh, important thing is that you understand that whenever you are learning anything in yoga, yeah, it is already there. It is information that already exists. You're not learning something new. This is a very important thing that you need to understand whenever you're studying yoga, that it is something which has existed since the dawn of time. That is what is believed, that yoga, because I always keep mentioning it is a way of living. So earlier it was more, easily seen in the way of living of people. Nowadays, in modern times, it's, not very easily seen, especially in city life. When you go to city life, you will see that people do not have the time, so they try to go for things which are fast because their life is so fast, right? So this whole history and development will actually help you to see how you can incorporate yoga into your fast-paced life. However, earlier it was such a deep part of the everyday existence that it wasn't considered to be something separate. No separate courses, no separate education was taken. It was actually in the way of living and for a very deep spiritual practice. It was only when one wanted to go very deeply into it, was very sure of what they were looking for when they were practicing yoga in their day-to-day life. That is when they went to a gurukul. Gurukul was a place where there was a guru, or guru is someone who helps you on the path of your spiritual journey. And that is when they left everything behind, went to a gurukul. But before all of this, it was actually a way of living. And for us also, it's not just restricted to these classes. You is not restricted to your philosophy classes or your meditation classes. It's how it changes you in your everyday life, and how you change your way of dealing with everything, in your day-to-day life. So these few hours of classes you will see will eventually start affecting how you live, and that is the exact purpose of you. It has to change the way in which you live. So it's not something which is merely intellectualized. If you want to go for very deep intellectual analysis, I told you again in the introductory class only that Sankhya forms the theoretical base of yoga. So yoga is mostly about practice, right? About the practical portion of the theory that has been given as per Sankhya, right? So it is information that already exists, and now we are just learning about it because we got disconnected somewhere to all of these things that already existed. So it's, you will not be learning anything new over here, but you will be learning something which will help you to analyze and lead your life in a better way, right? So because Maharishi Patanjali ji, I will write this name down, is the main person who systematized the entire uh, information related to yoga at a particular point of time in history. So on the basis of his existence, the entire time period is broadly divided into three categories. His time, first I will write his name. Actually, let me share my screen because students who will be watching later on will have difficulty with the names. Right, and Maharishi Patanjali. He is considered to be the father of classical yoga. He was the one who compiled the entire system of yoga. So, like I told you, yoga existed before as well. Before his time and even after his time, it still exists. However, he was a person who systematized the entire study of yoga and gave a very beautiful text called Patanjali Yoga Sutra. We will have a separate class on this text specifically, right? And then I will be explaining to you how he has broken down the entire system of yoga and how he went about everything. But because he is such a prominent name, whenever you study of yoga, the time periods broadly are divided as per his existence. So because as I've written, father of classical yoga. So his time period is called classical period, but before his time period, we call that time period pre-classical. Right? Then we have the classical period. And then we have the post-classical period. Right? So this, see, whenever you go into history, there are no fixed timelines. You will see a lot of people arguing about, the same thing existing in one timeline or the other, but I'm giving you a very like overall sorry, overall breakdown of the timeline. So if you jump from one source to the other, you might find variations in the timeline, but this is an overall timeline that I'm giving you. So this time is considered to be before 500 BC. Right? Classical period is from 500 BC to 800 AD. And post-classical period is after 800 AD. So in the post-classical period, after a while, there was, like, because now we come closer to our time, so there are two divisions of this timeline, right? So one is modern era, which is around 1700 to 1900, this time period. And then we have the contemporary times, right? Contemporary, yeah, so that is post this time. Right. So this is an overall division of the timeline. Whenever you see the history and development of you, then I will be touching upon each and every timeline and telling you how you develop from one time to the other. Okay. So let's begin with the pre-classical time. So when I started the philosophy classes, also I mentioned the Vedas, right? And I mentioned that there are 4 Vedas. So, Vedas are considered to be very ancient texts. So this timeline is nowhere near that timeline when the Vedas were written. But because an overall division has been done of a pre-classical period, so pre-classical period includes um, Vedas as being the source. They're still the source, but Vedas, the knowledge of the Vedas was pretty prevalent at this point of time. That was considered to be the major text on which you relied, right? And this is a very interesting thing. You will not find the direct mention of yoga in the Vedas, but you will find parts of the yogic system in the Vedas. So, like mention of asanas, pranayama, these techniques can be found in the Vedas. However, no direct mention of the word yoga will be found in the Vedas. So one thing is the Vedas, which form the basis of the entire yoga system. Like I again also mentioned when I started the classes, that Vedas form the basis of the yogic system. So this, the Vedic system was going on in a way that Vedas were read when someone wanted to understand, gain a deeper understanding of who they are and what is their purpose, why they are here, what is reality, what is unreal, what is permanent, what is temporary. All of these things have been mentioned in the Vedas, right? So one portion of the pre-classical period is the Vedas, right? And when we come closer to this timeline, so first thing was the Indus Valley civilization, right? So when you go back to this pre-classical period, the Indus Valley civilization is one of our major checkpoints that we have, where you will find evidence of yoga being practiced by people who existed at that point of time. So when you see a lot of carvings of the Indus Valley civilization, you will see a lot of postures which match the yogic system as we practice it today. The asana part is really prominent these days, But when you go back to the Indus Valley civilization, there were also certain carvings that like are still, you know, they are seen like, and the postures of yoga are found over there. You know, people standing or sitting in a particular yoga posture. Even meditative postures have been found where, you know, depicting the idea of meditation. So sitting in a particular manner to meditate, that was also seen in the Indus Valley civilization. Okay, so that becomes one of the major you know, physical evidence of this time, where you can actually see that people were practicing all of these things, right? And again, as you come down from the Vedas, so the, you know, a sense of all the Vedas are given in the Upanishad. So let me write down these words. So Vedas were, they date back to very ancient time, and the you know, essence of the Vedas is given in the Upanishads. And the Upanishads are actually mostly in story and conversation form. So the Vedas are very hard to read, you know, and a lot of intellectual development, a lot of earlier practice and study was required in order to understand the Vedas. However, Upanishads made it very easy for people to understand things, because now everything was in conversation form. So suppose you are having a conversation with someone you know, and suppose you are discussing something very technical, but you will gain a better understanding of whatever you are discussing with that person, uh, instead of just reading a book, right? So same thing is the difference between the Vedas and the Upanishads. The Vedas were in more technical language also, so it was harder to understand them. But Upanishads were like having a day-to-day conversation about very deep concepts. And however, the guru explained it to the student, you know. So when we read the Upanishads, we are that student. We want to gain that understanding. So it's very easy, very relatable for us to take the questions of the student, take the position of the student, and comprehend the answers that were given by the gurus of that time, right? So these form the essence of the Vedas. So now Vedas weren't necessarily to be read at that point of time. If one could gain access of the Upanishads, they would gain a better understanding of yoga and spiritual things. Okay. And other texts like Smritis, Purans, these are very, very like, you know, they're not that popular, one can say, or uh, not heard of. But these were also texts that formed the basis of getting the information of yoga during this time. Okay. Another thing that was very, very common at this point of time was the existence of two epics. There were two epics in our system. They're still there, but at this point of time, they were pretty prevalent. So Mahabharata and Ramayana. Okay? This is Mahabharata and Ramayana. Ramayana came first. Actually, Ramayan's timeline was earlier than Mahabharata's timeline. Okay? And Ramayana is an epic on the life of Lord Ram. So, Lord Ram, and how, you know, he was the king of a place called Ayodhya, and you know how his life was full of suffering and conflicts. However, his attitude of dealing with things has been shown in this epic, how he managed things at his point of time. So he's considered to be Lord Ram. You would have heard of, if you have been a part of Bhakti Yoga, especially where God is given a lot of emphasis. So you would have heard of this name Lord Ram, and in India, a lot of people worship him because of his attributes and traits that he showed. So he was a yogi who showed that balance, the balance I was talking about when I discussed Samatvam Yogic. So he showed that in his life, and managed his kingdom in that manner, managed his life in that manner. So this epic depicts, his life. So this is one of the major epics that existed at that point of time, that was studied at that point of time. Another very famous epic is Mahabharata. So again, a portion of Mahabharata is called, very famously known as Bhagavad Gita. We will have a separate class on Bhagavad Gita where I will tell you everything about Bhagavad Gita. So it is a part of this epic, Mahabharata. And Mahabharata is also, depicts a lot of yoga, of how, things were managed, dealt with in a yogic way. So the main person in this, one of the main characters, is Lord Krishna. When I will be talking about Bhagavad Gita, that is also when Lord Krishna was one of the major characters. He has a lot of shlokas in Bhagavad Gita also. So this one circles around another very famous god of India, Lord Krishna, right? So in the pre-classical period, these two texts were very prominent, and even there is some duality between this. Some say that Buddhism and Jainism fall in the earlier times of the classical period. However, some systems say that Buddhism and Jainism was very famous in the pre-classical period. All right, so another basis, like what people practiced at that point of time, were practices of Buddhism and Jainism. So the eightfold paths given by Buddha and his teachings, and same for Jainism. The practices given in Jainism were very prominently practiced at this point of time. Okay, so this becomes somewhere our pre-classical period, where all of these things existed, so that spirituality or a way of living was guided. Basically, at that point of time, there was no distinction between, right now we generally use this, you have a career life, you have a personal life, then you have a spiritual side too. But earlier, and even for our case in today's life, these are not separate parts. These will support each and every other part. So if you do not, if you however your finances are, they're going to reflect on your personal life, right? And however your mind is, the way in which you deal with situations, so that is going to reflect both in your career life and your personal life, right? So these are not separate things, these are actually combined together only. So at that point of time, the environment was such that one could see that these were, together. These days we see them as very separate areas of our life. But again, time was such. So yoga was also practiced in this manner during this timeline. All right. Then let me just cover a little bit more. Then I will ask you if you have any doubts. Okay. So then we come to the classical period. The classical period is mostly again famous because of Patanjali ji. Right? So Maharishi Patanjali is said to have existed between this timeline of 500 BC till 800 AD. And he was the one, so see, before his time, yoga existed, right? but he was the one who systematized the entire yogic form, right? So in Vedas, you will find in a very scattered manner, asana, the mention of pranayama, the mention of meditation, but all of these things were very scattered. Okay, and nobody knew how to, everybody was practicing, but he gave a very systematic form to the entire system. Like, when you go to school or when you go to colleges, they systematize the entire, course that has to be completed within that amount of time, be it 1 year, be it 3 years, 4 years. They systematize it completely, and on the basis of that, they divide it as per each semester, and then you complete that course, pass those exams, right? So if you were just told when you would go to an educational institution that this you have to cover, it's totally up to you how you're going to do it. So if you wouldn't choose what you're going to do at a particular point of time, right, it would be very haphazard. Yeah, so by the end of your 1, 2, or 3 years, 4 years, everything would be left, or you won't be able to do it that systematically as the entire education system is right now allowing you to do, right? So when you pick up something, that is when you start working towards it. The same thing happened. Everything existed in a very scattered manner before Patanjali's time, but when he came in, he gave a very concise text. So Vedas and Upanishads also, when you go, there are so many Upanishads. As per one of the Upanishads, there are actually 108 Upanishads. See, so much information. Vedas, I told you, they are 4. However, they are very, very long, right? So, and even Mahabharata and Ramayana, when you read, they are very, very vast texts. So there is so much information out there. But when Patanjali ji came in, he gave only 195 sutras to tell you about the entire system of yoga. So he said, I'm just going to systematize this entire discipline, and he just gave 195 sutras. In fact, if you just buy the book of the sutras, it's going to be very thin. It is just the commentaries which you will see that the books are very thick. However, if you just read the sutras one by one, they're just very thin book, will complete it all. Like, you wouldn't even require, I think, 2 or 3 pages, you will be done. Like, that is how precise his text was. And in this, it is short and to the point. Okay, so he starts with that now he's going to impart the discipline of yoga, and then he goes ahead and tells you what yoga is. So we have already discussed that meaning, yoga's chitta vritti nirodh, right, in our previous classes. And see, before starting the text itself, in the beginning only, he said what is the point you are aiming to reach. All right, so he very I would say very intelligent man. The way in which he has presented each and every chapter is very systematized in the correct manner, and step-by-step process he has given. So in the first chapter itself, he starts with the meaning of yoga, and then he elaborates on vrittis. We discussed the mental modifications. However, he has elaborated much more on these things, and then he gives the method for an advanced level student. So he says that what is the practice for the advanced level student in the first chapter itself, because he understood that somebody who is on the advanced level will not have a lot of time to waste. So you can just read the first chapter and then continue on the path to achieving the final goal, right? After that, he moves on to an intermediate level student in his second chapter. That is when he gives a path for an intermediate level student, and he says that if you are not an advanced level student, then you can directly in the beginning of the second chapter itself, you can understand these things, and then proceed on your path. When you become advanced level student, then go for advanced level path, and you do not have to go until the end of the entire system. So that is how intelligent he was. He said that not necessary that you complete all of these, depends on what level you are at. Okay, and then in the second chapter itself, by the end, he gives the 8 limb path of yoga, which is also famously known as Ashtanga Yoga. Right, this is a very famous term that you must have heard. One of your subjects is Ashtanga Vinyas Yoga, practical classes. Right, so he gave the entire system of Ashtanga Yoga, where he gave 8 limbs for a beginner level student. All right, so for a beginner level student, these 8 limbs are given, and one moves step by step from one limb to the other in order to reach the final goal. So he has given the entire system, and then that goes on in the third chapter as well, and then he explains other things, and then the fourth chapter he tells about the final goal that one needs to achieve, which he called 𝐾𝐲𝐻. I will be giving this in depth when we do the class on Patanjali Yoga Sutra. However, just for now, I'm just mentioning the name. So he describes the characteristics, the all of these things of the Yoga Sutra, of 𝐾𝐲𝐻, the final point that he has described in his text. Okay, any doubts so far in any of the timelines? What is going on? How yoga developed? Oh,
No doubts, but are we going to cover the 8 limbs of yoga tonight or later?
okay, no worries. I'll also cover these 8 limbs. You will have separate classes on all of
Okay.
this. This is just overall information that I'm sharing. So,
Okay, thank you.
so this is the time when Raj Yoga. This is a part of Raj Yoga. This form of yoga was very prominent. Okay, the environment supported. This is a very high form of yoga, and at that point of time, the environment, everything in day-to-day life was such that Raj Yoga was easily practiced. Okay, when I cover the schools of yoga, I will touch upon Raj Yoga as well. We have 4 schools of yoga: Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Raj Yoga. So one of them is this one. So this point of time, it was such that these practices could be supported. So now after Patanjali ji went away for a while, all of these things were practiced. But after a while, times changed, things changed around, and the environment was also totally different. So the post-classical period came into existence, where a very famous person called Adi Shankaracharya. He is considered to be one of the most famous people of this time, where he propagated the entire yoga concept. He is known to be he spoke on Vedanta philosophy. So earlier also I mentioned Sankhya Yoga, 𝐾𝐤𝐴𝐻𝐿, Vivansa and Vedanta. So at this point of time, he is considered to be one of the most famous people referred to during this time, right? And he was the one who in fact compiled Bhagavad Gita also. So the text from Mahabharata, it was again in it was scattered basically. So he was the one who compiled Bhagavad Gita also, and at this point of time, Bhagavad Gita became very famous. Okay, so now a lot of people were reading and were in touch with the teachings of Bhagavad Gita also. And during this time only, after a little bit of time after Vedanta and everything, practices like, Hatha Yoga, Hatha Yoga, which is connected with the Nath cult. We will have a separate class on Hatha Yoga also. So I will tell you more about it in that class. Okay, Hatha Yoga, Tantra Yoga. Tantra Yoga. All of these practices now started coming into existence. Why? Because the time changed and the thinking of people changed, and earlier yoga was more of a way of living. During these two times, I think it was more of a way of living, but now with the coming of Hatha Yoga, uh, separate like asana practice. So your practical classes, the basis of your, asana pranayama practice comes from Hatha Yoga. This is the foundation, this is the basis of all the variations that you see of yogic practices going on throughout the world. This is actually the foundation or basis of Hatha, all of the practices that you do, right? So asana, pranayama, mudras, bandhas, all of these are in Hatha. So Hatha Yoga mostly focuses on working with the body and how you need to make the body stable in order to proceed on the path of Raj Yoga. Main goal of Hatha Yoga is Raj Yoga only. So now people were facing more illnesses, people were not that fit. So first they needed to prepare their body and then they could go into Raj Yoga. So now see, as the time changes, we are coming with more variations. Same thing we are trying to achieve, but time changed, people changed, practices that they wanted to, they needed to do now, not wanted, needed to do now to reach that same level of this time were much more. And even in Hatha Yogic texts, you will see 2-3 texts which are of different timelines. So in each and every text, you will see different practices. Why? Because with time, again, more practices were required to attain the same amount of uh, uh, fitness or same amount to be ready for spiritual practices, because your body needs to be prepared for these practices, right? You just cannot go into meditation. If you go into meditation or working on the mind directly, you will come running back because we are not prepared. We cannot even sit for 10-15 minutes, yeah, without movement. So think of people who sit for 2-3 hours in the same asana. So you need to prepare yourself, right? So these practices started coming into existence, and then we come to the modern era where gurus like Swami Vivekananda and Sri Aurobindo. These are two very prominent names of this time. They have some time left. Okay. So Swami Vivekananda and Sri Aurobindo, these are two very prominent names during this time. And Swami Vivekananda's guru, Ramakrishna Paramahansa. He was the guru of Swami Vivekananda. So Swami Vivekananda, at his point of time, he popularized the entire concept of yoga in the West. So he gave a lot of, he was a part of a lot of meets and conferences that were held in the West, and he was the one who popularized the entire concept of yoga in the Western time, right? And same goes for Sri Aurobindo. He was also a person who gave his own. Now these gurus, they made certain variations also on the path of yoga. So when you go to Sri Aurobindo, any Sri Aurobindo ashram, you will see that integral yoga. He has given the concept of integral yoga, and he has divided the entire process of yoga in his own manner. So now with times changing, once again, all of the things that existed changed again, were propagated in a much more simple or easily understood manner, so that people of that time could absorb this information, right? Because what will I do if I just read the Vedas? Nothing. I would have acquired a lot of information and a lot of insights, yes, but if I'm not applying it into my day-to-day life, then what is the point, right? So these guys came in, changed, revolutionized the entire concept, understanding, thinking of yoga, right? So then we come to the contemporary times, where gurus like Osho. Osho is very famous in the West. Okay, Osho and Sri Ravi Shankar. These gurus, S.N. Goenka-ji, and many movements. So I'm just going to etc. So Sadhguru also being one of them. So at this point of time, after the 1900s, these were the gurus who further propagated yoga and the entire understanding of yoga for the day-to-day people. If you go to any Osho ashram, you will see a lot of different meditations that he gave. Dynamic meditation being one of the most famous forms of meditation in today's world. Like even if you go to like any ashram in the West or in India, you will see these meditations taking place. And same goes to Sri Ravi Shankar. There are a lot of variations that he also added in Hatha Yoga, only a lot of practices of Hatha Yoga. And those are being practiced by today's generation in order to attain, again, move to that point where they can become fit for the practice of Raj Yoga, mostly meditation. So the entire purpose of practicing yoga is to go in a state where you can meditate for a long period of time, right? Because that, when I will explain the 8 limbs also, you will see that meditation forms a very important part for you to reach to the final goal, right? So all of these processes, not to be in there are a lot of modern practices that have been developed by these gurus, who now pass down yoga in a way which can be practiced by most of the people. So another very famous Ramdev, Baba Ramdev. Especially in India, Baba Ramdev is very famous, and his practices, he has, I think, a particular timing on the TV also when his show comes, and people practice along with that. So it's very helpful for them to follow up on the practices of yoga because of these gurus who got it into our times, where they understood that right now we are most of the people who exist are sick right now, right? We are not even in a healthy state. So how to become healthy? First, we need to attain health. That is when we can move ahead on our spiritual journey. So right now, our entire process of yoga has become such where we are fighting to keep our health, where we are fighting to remain in a healthy and happy state. And once we attain that it is then that we can proceed on our path to, a place where we rise above these things. Right now, we are just struggling in our day-to-day life just to keep our bodies fit, to keep our bodies clean, with the practice of Shankaracharya, all of these things. So regular cleansing, regular asana pranayama practice, we are still trying to reach to a healthy state. After we reach that, then somewhere we will, start becoming ready for spiritual practices. Then we can actually see the mind as a tool that we can actually, master, and we can direct the mind. Right now, the mind and senses are directing us in our lives, but there will come a point in your practice where you will be the master of your mind, right? So step by step we move up into all of these practices. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. Any doubts in anything we have discussed today about the history and development of yoga? No doubts? All right, so you guys can go and read up more about these things. If this interested you, you can go ahead and read up many more things. You will find a lot of information on the limited names that I have mentioned for now, right? So let's end today's session here. And we are going to meet for our pranayama class at 3 in the afternoon after this, right? So everybody just sit up straight, close your eyes. Just observe your breath. Trusting that you have absorbed all the information that I have shared. We will chant it one time, followed by 3 shantis. Forward. Join both your palms together in front of the chest and bow down. Stick out a few moments in our day to be grateful for everything we have. Sense of gratitude. And now I will put the palms together. Keep them on the eyes. Very slowly while blinking. So open up your eyes, come back with a smile. Let us meet at 3 o'clock for your pranayama class. So bye bye everyone.